Hello and welcome to Glasgow Loves You. This evening we're speaking with Terry Reintke, and Terry's been a member of the European Parliament for Green since 2014. She fights for the rights of the LGBT community and women's rights and works on strengthening Europe's regions. She's Vice Chair of the Greens EFA group in the Parliament. She's a member of the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, and is a member of the delegation to the EU-UK Parliamentary Partnership Assembly. So welcome, Terry. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure to be here.
Great. And we've got Bernd who's helping on IT, and we've got Jenny who'll be taking your questions on social media. So you can just pop them in Facebook there if you have any questions. So first of all, tell us how you became involved in politics initially.
Well, I actually became involved in politics already quite a while ago, so probably around 20 years ago. I'm 33 now, and it was really in my teenager years that I felt, and this was really something that more had to do with issues maybe that I'm not so much working on anymore. So, for example, energy production. You probably know that in Germany there was a very big debate around nuclear phase out, but also how we can change to having more renewable energies. And this was something that really politicized me. And that's why then I became interested also specifically in green politics, but also something that really, made me think about how I can influence society and my environment was the Iraq War. Because as you can probably remember, there was a big debate in Germany and I think in a lot of other European countries whether they would join this coalition of the willing to go to Iraq and invade the country. And this was something that I was very strongly against. And this was also the context in which I first went to demonstrations, and through that then became more engaged also with activists who are, organizing demonstrations or different forms of protest. And then eventually I ended up in the youth organization of the Green Party, the Young Greens. And then through that, really from the local, my local environment and my local city and region, I went first to the federal level, and then I also became more engaged on the European level. And now my heart, as you know, is really beating for Europe. So I'm mostly interested in what is happening on the European level now.
Okay, so can you tell us a bit more about, what the EU means to you, and why did you put yourself forward to become an MEP?
Mm-hmm. I mean, as I said, I'm a very committed European, and I mean, to be honest, I have always been a very committed European, because obviously I come from an area that is also very close to a border, close to the Dutch border, but that is also really in the heart of Europe. So I always felt a lot of the advantages that the European Union has for me, because there was obviously free travel through the Schengen Accord, and then I had the chance with the freedom of movement, not only to move around in Europe, but also to stay. As you probably know, I studied for a year, my Erasmus year in Edinburgh, so this made me very convinced me that this European project is something that I want to support. And then in 2014, basically when we were preparing the European elections, we had a big discussion about youth involvement, because as you might remember, the youth unemployment rates in a lot of European countries were really high at that time. We were just seeing the consequences of the economic crisis. And while we could see that the politics that was done was very strongly influencing the lives of young people, there were very few young people who could actually get engaged in the institutions by, for example, being able to vote and to really influence the decisions that were being taken. And this was a very strong incentive for me to decide to run for the European Parliament. I can remember the situation where we were walking home from a protest, and then a friend of mine basically told me, yeah, Terry, I mean, it's really great that we are so engaged in protesting and doing demonstrations and actions all the time. But maybe you are also in the privileged position of actually being able to run on a list that could put you into one of these parliaments that, you know, we are complaining about, that they are not doing what we want them to do. And I think this really shook me. And then I decided to run for the European Parliament in 2014. And then it immediately worked, and I became an MEP and have ever since then never regretted that decision.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think we can all agree that was the best decision. So you mentioned Erasmus there, and a few years ago you wrote a letter calling for to allow Scotland and Wales to rejoin the European Union Erasmus scheme. So why was that important to you?
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, as you know, I was very much opposed to the idea of Brexit, because I think first and foremost, it is very damaging to the people living in the UK, but obviously it's also damaging to the rest of the European Union, because we have lost a member state, a very big and, you know, a very, for me, especially important member state. And during all this process of the negotiations, first of the withdrawal agreement, but then also on the agreement for the future relations, so the TCA, I think, I don't know, I always had this belief that no government in the UK would be that, if I can use the word, stupid and evil, maybe, to not further participate in the Erasmus program, because I think it is a program that all across the EU, but also specifically in the UK, is very much supported. And then there were also promises made, I think even by Boris Johnson himself, that the UK would stay in the Erasmus program. And then we know the outcome. Last minute, it was agreed, or the UK government basically said that they don't want to continue to participate in the program, which I think for a lot of people in the UK, but also for a lot of people in the EU, obviously, was a very big setback. And for me personally, because obviously I had, you know, massively benefited from the possibility to study this year in Edinburgh. It was an amazing year for me, both academically, but also in my own development, and also politically, because to live in another country and to have this chance of really having insight in what is happening there, that really broadened my horizon. And I think it really also shaped me as a person. And I would still say today that without this experience, I would have not become a member of the European Parliament. I would not be the person that I am today. So I felt that it was a very, very wrong step from the UK government to withdraw the participation in the Erasmus program. And then we heard about Northern Ireland getting the chance to stay, obviously through a special agreement with the Republic of Ireland. And then we discussed, because both the Scottish as well as the Welsh government were very open to further participate in the program. I think there was also a lot of mobilization all across the UK, but specifically also in Scotland and Wales, on being able to stay in. And this is basically on this basis, we wanted to check with the Commission what is possible, whether Scotland and Wales can individually stay as, you know, regions or devolved nations inside of the UK, part of the Erasmus program. Or if that is not possible, what other ways there are to keep closer links between Scotland, Wales, and the European Union. And I think that this is still an ongoing process, because we will still have to see also very practically how these ties can be kept, or some of them even re-established, because some things have already been lost as we speak. And yeah, I think it's still not something where we have a final answer to, but I can tell you already now that we just negotiated a new coalition agreement for the German government, which I was closely involved in the chapter on Europe. And there we explicitly have a mention of the Erasmus program also, that the Erasmus program also should be open to regions inside of the UK, because we believe that keeping these links and keeping this engagement, not only between educational institutions like universities, but also just, you know, for regular citizens to have the chance to meet other people and to build bridges, is something that is so important. And if I may add a last point, I mean, for me, the Erasmus program is so symbolic and so important, not only because of my own experience, and I think the many people who really support this program, but also because I think the Erasmus program and the engagement that especially young people have with other European countries really gives me hope that at some point the UK could, you know, not next year, not in 2 years, not in 3 years, maybe not even in 10 years, but at some point that there could be a shift towards actually rejoining the European Union again, because obviously that is something that I really wish for, and I think also a lot of people in the UK really wish for.
Yeah, absolutely, that's true. And that's fantastic news. So we'll look forward to hearing more about that. And so just getting back then to Brexit, so how did you initially hear about the concept of Brexit, and like what was your reaction and the general reaction of your colleagues?
Well, you know, the first times that I got in contact with this idea, or that, you know, I heard about it, or how it was debated politically, was really about David Cameron trying to reconcile an internal party conflict in the Tory party. So, I mean, we obviously knew about Nigel Farage and how he was ranting against the European Union. But I also think, and maybe this was also a mistake, that for a very long period of time, he was not really taken that seriously, because a lot of people felt, you know, this man, he's so not serious. Why should we take him seriously? And I think then before the referendum, basically we could see how much pressure he was able to put on the Tory party, and through that then actually reach his aim to have this referendum be put forward. And still looking back today, I really think that the reaction should have been much clearer also from the European Union. You know, I was one of the few MEPs who actually went during the referendum campaign to the UK and tried to campaign against Brexit, because I think a lot of people had the feeling that this is a very domestic affair for the UK, so other Europeans should not get involved that much. I always kind of disagreed, because I always felt that, you know, this European Union is more than just the sum of its parts. You know, we also create European citizenship together. We create an idea about, you know, where we want to build Europe towards together. And that's why I also felt that I should get engaged debating with people in the UK about whether they should or should not stay inside of the European Union. Anyway, most people had a different impression at that time. And I think one of the things that was really not pointed out enough in the referendum debate was how unclear all this plan of leaving the European Union actually was. You know, like this messy situation that then ended up in the withdrawal agreement being voted down several times in the House of Commons, all this chaos that, I mean, from the outset really looked like total chaos and a total mess that Brexit created in the UK. That was really largely due to the fact that there was no clarity what the outcome of this referendum actually meant. Does it mean, you know, not having any links to the European Union anymore whatsoever? So basically no deal Brexit and then WTO basis for future relations? Or does it mean to stay in the single market, to stay in the customs union? So all of this was actually not really qualified beforehand. And I think the lesson that we learned from it is, if we have referendums like this, which, you know, I'm not against direct democracy, absolutely not. I'm a big supporter of direct democracy, but we have to make people aware about what they're actually voting on. And I think this was something that was not highlighted enough before the referendum. And then obviously it led to this really, really difficult situation. And one last point, I mean, you asked me about the first time I heard about Brexit. You know, when this campaign slogan, "Get Brexit Done" for Boris Johnson came out, I think if it wasn't so hurtful for so many people, I really wanted to laugh, you know, because it's so obvious that Brexit is going to create conflicts for such a long period of time. You know, Brexit is not something that you can just get done. Brexit is something that will last and last and last, and new issues will come up, because obviously beforehand, with a membership inside of the European Union, for all the issues that came up between the UK and other EU member states, there was a basis of how they could be resolved inside of the European Parliament, you know, in the Council, in the Commission, you know, there is like a democratic procedure of how you resolve these issues. But now this is gone. So I think that the slogan, get Brexit done, or, you know, Brexit is over, this is really something that we will learn in the years to come is absolutely not true. So we will again and again have to try to find solutions to potential conflicts. And I really think that it's going to, over time, also create more and more damaging consequences for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, those are really excellent points. And we've heard that, you know, here before in Glue that, you know, people said that they knew what they were voting for, but people actually didn't know what they were voting for at all. They couldn't have known. Yeah, and so I'm told that there's a couple of questions coming in via social media. So just pass you over to Jenny.
Yeah, we have a comment from Catherine Butler. Do you think enough people in the EU realise that there are so many in the UK, even in England, who want to be back in the EU and who feel and say they are still Europeans?
Well, I actually think that this is quite well known. So I mean, if you take me, I'm a member of the European Parliament. I obviously have a lot of links also to different groups in the UK who were really fighting against Brexit. But for example, if I speak to my parents, and, you know, they are not in politics, they have nothing to do with politics, also their friends, I think they really understand how negative the consequences are to many, many people in the UK. And I don't only mean the economic consequences, because that has become, you know, largely visible. There were a lot of media reports about, you know, the shortage in fuel because there are not enough lorry drivers anymore. Then these multiple issues about fish, the things in the TCA that are still not really working. But I also think, and this is maybe even more important in the long run, the loss of rights that people have gone through. And this is obviously, you know, I was speaking about growing up close to a border. People really enjoy that they're not checked at the border anymore when they want to go to the Netherlands, you know. They really enjoy that they have the possibility to live and study and work wherever they want to inside of the European Union, even if this is only a theoretical possibility, even if maybe they're never going to do it. But I think a lot of people really acknowledge this. So, you know, when I think the Conservative Party came out with the slogan, finally, we are ending freedom of movement, on a share pic on social media, as if this was something positive, you know. And my parents, they were really like, yeah, but freedom of movement is one of the greatest achievements that the European Union has brought forward. And it's horrible for so many people in the UK that they're losing this now. So I think that they can really relate to the many millions of people in the UK, also in England, who disagree with this decision and who would like to actually reverse it and go back to a time when the UK was part of the European Union. And I think that we also need to keep a conversation going so that people don't forget about that. Because what I'm a little bit afraid of is that, you know, now with Brexit and the immediate consequences that we could see, there was a lot of media attention around this. But then in the long run, are we really going to keep these conversations going? And I think in order for that to happen, we need to put in effort. And one of these things, for example, that can make it possible is the Erasmus program. But I think there are also a lot of other ways how we can keep people engaged. And this is very important also for people in the rest of the EU to understand that exactly what you were asking is true, that there are a lot of people in the UK who actually really regret this decision and who would like to come back.
Is there any more questions on social media?
I guess just a comment as well, and following on from that, absolutely, completely agree. Thanks, Terry, for saying all that. But Ernie is pointing out that Erasmus Plus and the associated projects also a huge loss to the youth work sector, because I think it was widening, wasn't it, to include more than just like universities. And it's such a shame to come out at that point. So thank you for keeping fighting for us.
Okay, thanks for that. So just getting back then to Brexit, so we've seen plenty of examples of misinformation and propaganda being used against the public in elections. So what do you think are the best weapons that we can use against that? And what do you think, where do you think there will be the targets for the next election manipulation going forward?
Mm-hmm. I think, first of all, this is not only a problem in the UK. I think we really need to see a broader picture there, because I think it's a problem all across the EU, and I think it's actually a global problem. I mean, now, and this is not related to Brexit necessarily, but all the misinformation that is spread around Corona and the pandemic and vaccinations, and I think that that's really an issue that can, not only before a referendum, but in general, completely destabilize our democracies, because if we are not going to stand up to this level of really organized disinformation, then I think, you can really turn around elections and actually get people into power that will maybe never give it up again. So I think that this is something that goes beyond, but obviously Brexit is also one of the examples of this, where you could really see that on an organized, very organized scale, this information was being spread with a lot of money behind it. I think we also always have to see that there is obviously an economic interest that certain people who happen to have a lot of money have with projects such as Brexit, because obviously there is a deregulation agenda behind it, going down on standards, environmental standards, but also social standards and other issues, like, for example, regulation in the financial markets. I think all of these things, these different threats have to be put together so that people can really understand what is behind it. But yes, it goes beyond. And I think that, now, as you probably know, we have a very big file coming up on the European level, the Digital Services Act, which is really going to put a lot more possibility to regulate the internet on the table, because obviously we want to have free speech, and we want the internet to stay free and people to have access to it. But at the same time, we also need to make the big internet giants, like, for example, Google, like, for example, Facebook, like, for example, like, for example, Twitter and others, we have to make them accountable to what they are doing. And I think that the latest revelations in, especially coming from the Facebook company, really show that right now this is not what they are doing, because basically they are making money on creating more division, and also largely on the spread on disinformation, and they are really not doing enough about it. So I hope that from the European level, in this Digital Services Act, we are going to have a stronger regulation, because obviously the internet should be free and open to everyone, but it's still not a lawless space, And this, when we speak about disinformation, is a very important point, but also you have mentioned in the beginning, I work a lot on women's rights and also LGBTI rights. The same is true, for example, for hate speech or cyber violence, because we see also on a more and more organized scale that there are attempts to basically silence certain groups in the society from having opinions and, sharing them online as well. So I think that these are developments that are very concerning. And as I said, they're not only concerning from an individual point of view, but they're very concerning from a democratic point of view, so for the whole of the society structurally. And this is why I also think we need to find political solutions to that.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's just hope that law is effective. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as well going forward. And so another area, like closely related, is the rise of nationalism. So especially in Hungary and Poland, and so hard-won rights, especially involving the LGBT community, they're at risk now. So is the current EU strategy the right one?
That's a very good question. First of all, maybe to say a little bit about the analysis of what is happening in countries like, for example, Hungary and Poland. I think one of the things that is becoming more and more clear, and in Hungary, this is a process that has been going on for more than 10 years now, is that there is a close link between fundamental rights of certain groups, for example, the LGBTI community, but also other minorities, and the general functioning of democracy and, stable institutions, rule of law based institutions. And I think that very often what is happening is that there are certain minorities being identified as scapegoats in a society. There are media campaigns organized against them. Like, for example, in Hungary, it was massively done around 2015 against refugees, against Muslims, and now they're shifting more to the LGBTI community. And on the basis of this buzz, basically people like Viktor Orban are undermining democratic institutions and organizing an authoritarian power grab. So, you create a lot of noise around a certain minority that presumably is responsible for something bad in society, and then secretly with backdoor deals and, maybe not so visible to the public, you are creating a system that is massively corrupt and that is massively impeding on fundamental rights of all citizens and on democratic institutions. And this is what has been happening in Hungary. And I think this was a little bit of a blueprint also for the Polish government, because we see that very similar patterns are being used. And to be honest with you, the strategy of the European Commission so far, to me, has really not been sufficient, because the problem is that basically the European Commission for a very long time has been analyzing what is happening. I think there was a lot of very good consultation from, civil society organizations that were monitoring these processes, but also from academia, from lawyers, really from experts, showing that there is a danger, then showing that the danger is actually becoming reality, and then showcasing all these issues that are, problematic. But there was not that much more done than just analyzing and monitoring what the situation was. And the European Parliament now for many years has been calling for the Commission to take much more proactive measures against countries like Hungary and Poland. And this is not meant to punish anyone. This is not meant, to be a measure to make life difficult for the citizens in Hungary or Poland. Quite the opposite. It is meant to defend the fundamental rights of the EU citizens that are living in Poland and Hungary and other countries. Because at the end of the day, this European Union is not just a union of economies working together or trading together. This is a union that is based on rule of law, fundamental rights. And these fundamental rights apply to all EU citizens, and not only the ones living in Finland or Belgium, but also the ones that are living in Poland and Hungary. So they are also the concerns of the European Commission. And for me, the Commission has really acted far too hesitantly on all of these issues. And with this, basically other governments have seen that, nothing is being done about it. So they were, in a way, encouraged, or at least not, disincentivized to implement similar reforms, if you want to use that terminology. And I think that right now we can really see that there is a certain level of spillover effect also to other countries. And this is something that is, not only of grave concern anymore. It is something that has very negative, very tangible consequences for a lot of people. And I think it also needs to show that there needs to be a paradigm shift coming from the European Commission and a much clearer defense of these European Union values like rule of law and democracy. And most of all, and I always want to stress that as much as possible, the fundamental rights of the citizens living in these countries. And this is why the Parliament, but also I think a lot of civil society actors are trying to put more pressure on the Commission to actually do more.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because when we actually tweeted about this interview today, we got a response saying that the EU is anti-Polish, but in fact the EU is trying to defend Polish people, isn't that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, also then there are some people, I don't know, like in Germany or maybe other countries, that basically take this line, if Poland and Hungary don't want to follow the basic rules of being a democracy or having rule of law based institutions, then they should be kicked out of the European Union. And I really think that the absolute opposite is true, because if you do that, if you would really, kick them out, as some people call for, this would have an even more devastating effect for the Polish and Hungarian citizens, because that would mean that the safeguards that so far, I mean, they have obviously not worked sufficiently, also because the European Commission was lacking the political will to actually use them. But these safeguards would completely be gone. And I think that this is why, for me, I'm really the opposite of being anti-Polish. I'm very much, I'm very, very happy about Poland and also Hungary being members of the European Union. But I think in order to defend the fundamental rights of the Polish and Hungarian citizens, it is so important to use the instruments that are there already to defend rule of law and democracy.
Absolutely, yeah, you're right. I want to see if there's any more questions on social media.
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. So anyway, speaking of being out of the EU or in the EU, so I actually met you in Belfast a few years ago, and so just moving on then to Northern Ireland, how do you think the EU will react if the UK actually triggers Article 16, because they've been threatening to do that for a while now? And is there the talk here is about Westminster trying to provoke a hard Brexit so they can actually blame the EU? You know, so what's your thoughts on that?
Well, to be very honest, I see that there is some arguments that show that this could actually be the case. I mean, I obviously hope that solutions can be found. You know, that the European Commission, with regards to the actual implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol on the ground, came up with another package of proposals, which are really, you know, down-to-earth practical proposals of how you can make things work. The reaction from the UK government is very often, instead of reacting to these proposals and maybe making counter proposals and then, you know, trying to find some compromise in between, is to really generally attack the Northern Ireland Protocol. And this is just something that, you know, the European Union, but I think any kind of credible political actor cannot accept. Like, you cannot sign up to an agreement and then just a few months later or a few years later, you just say, okay, we never actually signed up to this, so we are not bound by it. And we are going to do everything we can to make the process so difficult and actually endanger the whole peace process in Northern Ireland and the Republic of, on the whole Irish island, in order to create, and this is what I feel it is, to create a political conflict that then we can use in our interest in a domestic discussion that, to me, is really not about what cannot be done with regards to the situation on the ground in Northern Ireland. So to me, I really have the impression that what the UK government and especially Boris Johnson want with this is to create a lot of buzz, also to maybe distract a little bit from other political construction sites there and other political problems there in the UK right now, where maybe the government is not doing the best job, instead of actually sitting down, trying to find solutions for real life problems. And I think that there is obviously a very, very big danger in this. But, you know, I could now say that I'm totally shocked and surprised that Boris Johnson is doing this, but to be very honest, I'm not, because I have the feeling that this is how Boris Johnson just does politics. Instead of actually trying to find solutions and making compromise and, you know, being a serious actor in maybe sometimes difficult political situations, all he's looking at is polls and, you know, interest, no, how do you say, like, you know, how much something is liked in the population, and then trying to spin a good narrative for himself. And I think that especially in a situation like in Northern Ireland, this is so dangerous, and this can create so much damage in the long run. So I really hope, obviously still hope, that solutions can be found on this, but I'm also really worried that this could escalate. I can just say one thing, and I can really say that because I have a lot of criticism towards the European Commission, and I think I'm not shying away from actually voicing this criticism, but I really think that nobody in Brussels wants there to be an escalation in Northern Ireland. This is really something that people value very, very high here. and all will be done to avoid this from happening. But if you have to negotiate with a government that is very often so reckless in political negotiations, it is very hard. And I can also see that. And I can see that the Commission is trying to make things work, but that it is a very, very big challenge right now.
Yeah. And in fact, Northern Ireland is doing quite well now at the moment. You know, so there's, I mean, it's really pointless just trying to stir up trouble there for no reason.
Exactly.
Yeah, so just speaking of trade, do you think that the UK is prepared for the new border controls that will come in January? So, you know, customs declarations, rules of origin for imports and exports, VAT accounting, etc. Do you think that enough was done to prepare businesses for these changes? I know it just feels like unfair asking you about trade in the UK, but
no, I think I can give you a short answer, and that is that I don't think so, and that I don't have the trust that enough effort and energy was put into actually making this work. Because I mean, we already had deadlines, and there were also, you know, assurances that it would work, and you know that the UK authorities would be ready, and then it didn't. And I unfortunately think that, again, not enough priority has been put on actually making things work on the ground. And that's the point, you know, instead of creating big political conflicts and trying, you know, to have these like moments of final escalations, what should really be done by this government is to look at the situation on the ground, to see, look, this is the part that we have to deliver on now. How can we deliver on this? And how can we make it possible that this can work? And this is actually what I have not been seeing over the past month. And this is part of why, if there are problems, they are not being properly resolved. So I still hope that things are going to work, and that solutions, if there are, you know, irregularities or if there are problems, can be found to them. But I have really, over the past month and years, lost the trust that this will be the case.
yeah, understandable. We're almost running out of time. We'll just take one or two more questions. And I think there's another question come in on social media.
Yes, there's a few comments, some perhaps just too long to discuss this evening at this stage, but certainly one about links for UK citizens living abroad and difficulties. And another chap saying they were never taught Irish history at school, so, and was shocked when he discovered more about it. But there's a few questions about how can we protest in the UK? What do you think we should do to make you know, the case for a closer relationship with the EU?
Well, if you ask me, you probably know the best what you can do and what you want to do. I can only say again, I mean, I've said this already in the plenary of the European Parliament and at many other occasions, that I really think that the mobilization of the pro-European citizens movement in the UK was so impressive and so inspirational. I think for so many people all across the EU. You probably saw that there were also a lot of pro-European movements kind of igniting after the Brexit vote in the rest of the EU, where we had, you know, spontaneous demonstrations, spontaneous protests by people saying we are never going to take this for granted because we can see now how easily it can be taken away from us. So I mean, first of all, I think already so many great things have been done in the UK, so many initiatives, and I know that most of them completely on a volunteer basis. So there was, you know, not like a big financing background behind it, as opposed to the other side that actually has a lot of money, and that I think that was really something that to me, really also always gave me hope again and again, you know, in moments when I thought, oh my God, this is really not going into the right direction, that I could feel that in these really massive demonstrations in London and elsewhere in the UK, I mean, also in Glasgow and Edinburgh, you could see that there is a very strong sentiment. And for now, I mean, for me, what I would be really interested in is to see what are the next steps, you know, what are the strategic aims. I mean, for me, as you probably know, and as you can guess, one of the options that I hope there can be enough political pressure at some point. I mean, even if it cannot be to rejoin the European Union as a whole, would be to say, but we would like to rejoin the Erasmus Plus program, and maybe to start political campaigning about that, because obviously the letter we got back from the Commission on Wales and Scotland joining was not fully what we had hoped for. But I mean, the last sentence that the Commission President answered was pretty clear, where she said that if the UK was to change their mind about being part of the Erasmus Plus program, we would be more than happy to take them back. So I think that this is something really concrete. And I also think because it is just so wrong, you know, to not take part in this program. I think that hopefully with a strong civil society engagement and a lot of citizens asking for this, hopefully maybe not this government, but one of the next UK governments can change their minds on this.
Yeah, that's a good positive note to end on. Thanks very much. It's just been an absolute pleasure talking to you this evening. We've covered so many topics, but I could definitely talk to you for a couple more hours, but you probably want to get back to your evening. So thanks very much just for, you know, your clarity and, you know, explaining things in such a straightforward, practical way. Really appreciate it. I think there's nothing else to say except for Weihnachten. I said that right.
For Weihnachten back. And I can tell you what I'm going to do for the rest of the evening, because I have a meeting now with a local Green group that wants to discuss about the chapter on Europe in the coalition agreement. As you might know, we just today had the final results of the party vote. So the Greens, the Liberals and the Social Democrats are going to be in the next government in Germany. And if you ever have the chance, we are right now translating the coalition agreement into English. So if you want to look at what we are writing about, amongst other things, also, I think a very good section about the UK and how we see the future relations with the UK, then maybe you can have a look. Because, and this is maybe also something that can end our conversation on a hopeful note, I think that now with this new German government, Germany will play a much more constructive and progressive role in Brussels. And if you read this chapter on Europe, we have a lot of ideas for what we want the European Union to be like. We obviously want to strengthen freedom of movement, and we want to build a strong and resilient European Union in the next years. And I hope that at some point in building this European Union of the 21st century, the UK is also again going to be part of this. So thank you so much. It was a really great pleasure to talk to all of you. And I hope that next time we can actually do it in person. You know, I promise I couldn't come this year because of the coalition negotiations, but I promise that next year I'm going to come to the UK, and then I'm also going to visit Glasgow.
Oh, yay, that's fantastic. We'll look forward to seeing you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye. Jenny and Bernd. Bye.